Hello, welcome to the With Parents podcast. My name is Jason Gant. I'm the pastor of kids and families here at Church of the Resurrection. I'm so glad you tuned in because today is a very meaningful episode. It's an episode of the heart. You're going to meet first-time children's book author, Jill Pietroburgo. This is her book. It's called Sometimes Grandma Calls Me Jean. It is about how, her own family, this is a personal story, but how, if you're struggling with dementia or a family member with dementia, how to help children understand that. There's a list in the back of tips and tricks. You're going to hear inspiring stories. You're going to get to meet her and her husband, Phil, who just happens to be a children's pastor. They both have a passion for kids and families and helping people to know a meaningful relationship with God. This is going to be a great episode. Let's go. So let's jump right in. Welcome, Jill and Phil. Great to connect with you both. Great to have spent some time getting to know you and to know your story. We are talking today specifically about this book. The name of the book is Sometimes Grandma Calls Me Jean. It hasn't come out yet. You can pre-order it on Amazon. We're going to carry it in our bookstore. You're going to find out why. This is a really important book. And it's not just a book to read to your children. It's a book that is filled, like pages in the back, of like tips and how to approach the challenging topic of dementia. Hey, tell us who you are.
Well, I'm Jill Pietroburgo, and this is my husband, Phil, and we've been married 33 years.
Awesome.
And we have 3 children. So we have Jesse, who's married to Maddie, and we have Grace, who's married to Malachi, and then our youngest is Samuel, and he's not married, so. But my job that I do is I work in early childhood special ed, and that means I work with 3 to 5 year olds in our school district. We live in West Plains, Missouri, which is in the Ozarks, almost in Arkansas. So we live in a small town, 12,000 people.
It's a beautiful area.
Yes.
If you've never been to this area, I've been fly fishing there a few times. It's absolutely gorgeous. The Ozarks are underrated mountain area in America. They really are. Everybody hears about the Rockies and the Appalachians. The Ozarks are beautiful.
It is. It's like the, springs that are crystal. I can't say it. Crystal
clear.
Yes.
Crystal clear, yes.
And they're beautiful, and kayaking and, canoeing and all that. So it's really fun.
That's cool.
But we live on my parents' family farm, and we just, Phil can tell a little bit about himself, but he's a children's pastor at our church and was a former middle school principal.
Okay. So, yeah. You guys have a lot of knowledge about kids.
Yeah.
Right? It's like
been around
innate.
Kids a little bit.
It's innate. Yeah.
We love Kansas City.
Yes.
We actually met in Liberty.
Yes.
Going to school at William Jewell.
Yes.
And
great school.
Then when we married, great school. When we married, lived here. And so we love Kansas City. We root for the Chiefs, as we were talking earlier.
Yeah,
I have to say, I am from St. Louis.
Okay.
So when it comes to baseball, we may have a little different side.
Well, at least we're different leagues, right?
That's right. That's right.
If you don't know about the Kansas City rivalry between the Royals and Cardinals, they play every year, even though it's National League and American League, but that's a big rivalry. It's called the I-70. Rivalry, which is, it's fun.
And that year, what was the year at Jewell?
So rough, 1985.
Yeah.
Of course, you were there. I wasn't. You're younger.
Nice. Lean into it now, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, this book is really important. It really is. There's not a lot of resources for families who are dealing with dementia and things like dementia. And so this is really important, but it's personal for you guys. This isn't just, hey, I'm an early childhood specialist, I'm a middle school and kids specialist, and this is an important topic. This is, you're being vulnerable about your own life. So tell us the inspiration behind the book.
Well, I am an adopted daughter. I don't know if I shared that with you, but my parents adopted me, and I was very young. I was 2 weeks old, and we lived in Oklahoma City. Another story, I can come back another time if you want to share this, but I found my birth mom when I was older, and that was definitely a testimony to share. But so out of that, my mom now developed dementia. And so we moved back to the area. We were living in St. Louis at the time, and my dad was actually the first one kind of getting sick and having a lot of heart issues, and he had some complications from the war because he had been shot. He was in the Korean War, and rheumatic, what was it called? Rheumatic fever. And so just things were building up on him. And so we really initially were kind of trying to come back to help caretake for my dad.
Yeah.
And even during that time, my dad would be like, your mom's just not, remembering things, or your mom's doing this, or even though he was the one, kind of failing at that point. And so after he passed away, and our kids were younger then, and, I can still remember at his funeral, my oldest son, he's just like, I just lost my best friend, and
Sure.
and that's, that's how close they were, and that's the beauty of caretaking as a family and helping family. But after my dad died, there's, people go through the depression, and you've lived with somebody, that long, and being married to someone, and it's hard. But I think all that piled up on my mom, and even though she was probably showing signs that got covered up from my dad, you're not paying attention as much to her because of him. And then after he was gone, you begin to see, oh, this is what he's talking about. And so she began to show more signs of, hallucinating and escaping the house, and not being able to do, believing that, things like we were poisoning her, or she wouldn't take her medicine, she wouldn't shower. And so those things began to be, obviously we were going to have to do something. We're not. And we were having people come in. We were paying people to come in and help us. And my son, he was in the later years, he was like in his senior year and playing soccer, and like we didn't want to miss his game. So we had to get people to come help us. And lots of people from the church were very gracious and to help us, and so that we could go do those things. And so that's, something I would want to say is like, don't be scared. I think a lot of people are scared to ask for help.
Yeah, sure.
But you need it. Like, you can't do everything, and so it's so important to realize to do that. You have to, there's, like the world doesn't stop like, oh, they're trying to really give for their mother, so there won't be any more problems like they have to deal with. Other things are going to still happen in your life.
Right.
And you've got to be able to, trust in the Lord to supply. Yeah. And so denying people to help you, I think, is almost like denying God's grace to you and his mercy, because those people can be hands and feet of Jesus, and so, I reach out I still thank people. Just last week, I was thanking somebody for thank you for helping me during those really dark times, because it was like being in a pit. It was it's scary, and you're like, Lord, is it Corrie ten Boom that says there's not a pit so deep that God's not deeper still, and so, and actually one of the verses in my book talks about the light, that God is light in the darkness, and, can't be overcome. And
that's right. And
I clung to that because I'm like, no matter how hard it seems right now, you're here, right. And there is a purpose. And, I always expressed myself through writing, even as a child. Like, I wrote songs, I wrote poetry. So writing was always something, I wouldn't say I was good at it necessarily, but it was just an expression of how I got my feelings out.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to write a book. I wasn't even thinking that. It was just I was in that time of awake and sleep, and these words were just pouring in my head. And I was like, what's going on? And so I just kind of write things down, and I'm like, Lord, what am I to do with this?
Yeah.
And of course you see what happened, but I just felt like it was a step of obedience. Okay, I'm just going to take this step. Okay, now this step. And so the end result was this book, but that's kind of how it all came about. But.
That's beautiful. And I hear your faith speaking. And it comes through in the book. It's certainly not an overtly Christian book, but you can tell your faith is threading through your story. This is your story, and you offer even tips in the back that offer some scriptures of hope and understanding, and that's just so important. It's so beautiful because God does meet us in those difficult places. Sometimes it's hard to see, and I also think there's always these moments where God can take a really difficult moment and also bring beauty from it. Sometimes in the moment it's difficult to see, but this is the God we believe in is always creating anew and afresh and resurrecting, if you will. And that's right. It's part of our faith, right? It's not about everything being perfect, but it's about recognizing that God is with us in all the mess, right? We're not alone. And that's just a powerful message. You can see that in who you are as we've been talking and just getting to know each other. And I love you mentioning your church community, because that's the kind of community we want to be, is that whenever somebody's in need, we want to surround them and be supportive and, yes, help them receive that support, because that's also a way the church gets to be alive in our lives, is to receive as much as give, right? It's like both and. But it's hard, right? Like it's hard to say, I need help.
Right.
And that's your intent here. Your intent as the church is to say to parents, here's a tool, here's a way you might approach this with your children if you're struggling with dementia in your family. And I love the illustrations. Here's the kind of the title page. Sometimes Grandma calls me Jean. These are very close depictions of real life, daughter and mom, right? And
our illustrator, I hired her from Canada through through an online called Upwork. But she wanted, I sent her lots of photographs. So these are done from real photographs of, the different scenes. And
yeah, in fact, you actually put a page, which I thought was so personal and authentic, a page of the actual photographs of your family. I think people can identify with this, right? Because then it's like, oh, this isn't just an author. This is a mom.
Yeah.
This is, this is a wife. This is a disciple of Christ. This is a person who also has and is facing difficult challenges in life, but also great joys. You see the joy through the family photos of life moments and just the recognition of the power of family. And even more powerful now that I learned you're adopted, that hadn't come out yet. What a beautiful story of what God is doing and speaking in through your life. And I have to mention, because it was kind of exciting when we started talking. He said, by the way, my husband's a children's pastor. And I said, that's amazing, because that's who wrote the foreword in here as well. And so want to give a little bit of a hype here to Phil, because I love what you shared in the foreword, Phil. You talk about the need to, we need to protect our children. We feel the need to protect our children. They are a gift from God. Yet at the same time, it's really about guiding our children and helping them learn about the life that they will experience, different challenges, and how do we equip them for it, right? And I don't know if you wanted to speak to that at all, and if Jill's okay with that, but it's a powerful word.
We both feel, and I know we share with you, that where children are truly discipled is in the course of life. And you shared with us in our conversation earlier just how important example is in how we actually teach and disciple.
Absolutely.
And so that's what we see for the benefit of children, grandchildren, when you're going through life, and it includes a challenge like loving one in your family with dementia. It's actually an opportunity for the child. It's an opportunity for us. God is obviously teaching us and growing us through every part of our lives. And so kind of Jill's call, I think, through this book, and I'm right there with her, is embrace the opportunity, embrace this part of life too. And the benefits are amazing of how children can grow through this as well as us.
Yeah, there's a great scripture I think of, right, when you say these kinds of words in Proverbs. It says, train a child up in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they will not stray from it. And
Right.
and we do. We are called to do that. That's our job as parents, as families, to help raise a generation. But maybe that training is really less teaching and more example of how we approach things in life, right? And
Couldn't agree more.
and being authentic. Like, we're human. This is a human experience. You shared with me how difficult some of the moments were, just balancing life in the family and how to get the best care for people you love, right? Those are tough moments. And that's why you wrote the book, that it might help other families. And I do want to mention too, because I just thought there's some really good, like, practical, there's meaningful, also practical. You've got a feeling chart to talk to your kids about how they feel, which I think is important. And then you offer this section on tips to support children, all kinds of ways you might think about talking about your emotions and learning and how your child recognize what a loved one may be feeling. And then you give a whole, 40 bullet points on how to prepare your child. Certainly your faith comes through as you share some verses that speak, but even beyond that, participating in painting with water and watercolor and creating a visual schedule to use with a loved one. I know the visual schedules are important, and that helps with people that are struggling with dementia. Just a great tool. And that's part of why we started this podcast, was to inspire parents, also to equip them to share, hey, these are tools that are out there that may help your family and your situation. I know that there are going to be people who are in the midst of this. And we're going to carry this book in our bookstore. It comes out in the next month, and it's also available now on Amazon. You can go and pre-order it, which is really cool. And then one thing I wanted to share, you shared with me a story. Tell us about when you went to do a reading with your mom.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So just last week, we were able to, so the book launched on Amazon on September 6th, and that day we went to my mom's care home, and we had already been, putting up flyers and kind of making a hype of it, and trying to get the residents excited and the staff, and everybody really was. Like, they were like, I can't wait till Wednesday. And we had a baker in town make forget-me-not cookies, and we had my mom's old music director. He now works for a hospice agency, but he came. And so after I read the story, and I had a big book made, so I didn't read from that. Yeah. I had this larger print made by a friend of mine, Scott Heidi, and he printed that for me. And then, so I read from that. And then David Ball did singing for us, and it was just great. They were just singing to the top of their lungs, and had a great time. So it was just, I told them, I cried talking on the microphone to them, because I knew, like, this is the moment. I know I will do other things with this book, but this is the moment, of just what this book means to me, and it's dedicated to people like that are working with your loved one, and people that are there. And, the residents even love my mom. Like, I walk in and they're like, oh, your mom's over there, or your mom did this today, or she smiled at me. They all watch out for her, and, they're...
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And so it's important to, if you do have to make that decision, like, that was never where we wanted to go. Like, we thought, good families keep their loved ones at home,
Sure.
But I've learned also that good families have to make other choices that are best. And because we couldn't protect my mom. So is that really honoring to her to keep her in an unsafe situation? So, I don't want anybody, I think a lot of people can get trapped into that thinking. And so building those relationships with, other caregivers that are a part of your journey is so important. And we try to encourage them and express our gratitude to them. And, and I try to help as much as I can. Like when I can go in and help feed her, or I can help, toilet her, like, let's get really authentic, I do it, I'm not as scared to, okay, well, come in here and do it, and sometimes I have to advocate for my mom, like,
Sure.
Hey, I saw this. Is there something we could do that would be different? Or, because she can't talk and she can't express those things herself. And so, but we can do those things with grace and with kindness. And we don't have to, not that you're maybe not feeling that inside at some points, but, but that's the way, like we talked about modeling, that's how we can model with our children. And if they're watching us, like, hey, I remember mom doing this with grandma,
Right.
that kind of thing. So
Yeah, that will be an imprint on our entire life, on your kids' lives, right? And let me say this: well done, good and faithful servant. Right? I mean, I know that's what I want to hear from God when I approach this life, and I would just say, thank you for this. Thank you for having the courage to share this, to really put it into a form where others can benefit from it. I just know there are going to be families in our church and maybe our community that read this, hear it, learn about it, and come up and say, I'm so glad you shared that story. We didn't know there were such a resource out there. And the best part about this book is not just that it helps children understand and learn how to have grace and to understand why their loved one might be calling them a different name or not remembering their name. My favorite part is that you were so vulnerable, both of you really, in your lives are entwined in the book. This is more than Jill the author. This is Jill the human, Jill the daughter. It shines through, and to me that means it just has more meaning, and so I appreciate that. And it's a beautiful, beautiful tool.
That's why Jason and I am so proud of Jill. I want to share that. Of course, I'm proud that she has set a goal and written a book and taken it through and is still working hard to get that book out, But more, I am proud of her just for who she is.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks for saying
this happened, because she loves deeply. She loves her mom, and she loves all of her family, obviously. But that's what this came from, and she loves her God.
Yes.
In fact, she hasn't really told, you mentioned that God would bring words to your mind and you would write them down. And the story, the actual narrative in the book really came pretty much as a flood all at once.
Wow.
And then, of course, she worked at it and fine-tuned it. But it was a step of obedience on her part to take it to that level of actually making sure it got into a book form.
Right.
So just proud of who she is, and so thankful for the impact it's going to have potentially, around the state, around the country, around the world, but the impact it's already had on our kids because they have a mom who loves the way she does.
That's beautiful. And I'll just go ahead and say it. So if you're a care worker out there in a nursing facility, an assisted home facility, you need to stock these books. You've got families coming in who are like, what do I do? How do I deal with this? If you're a social worker or you're a case manager, or you're a nurse in a setting, this is a great tool that you can give to a family, that you can offer up and say, here's a way you might approach this with your family. Here's a way that you might understand. This is one woman's journey through this and her family. And I think that's beautiful. And so this is fantastic. Any final words that you want to share?
Just tagging along, and I was feeling this earlier too, a part of the story about the event where the book was shared at Brookhaven Nursing Home. Yeah. We want to give a shout out to Brookhaven, where Jill's mom has lived for several years. And that day, she, as she does in the acknowledgments too, but she honored Brookhaven, saying, this is about honoring my mom today, but it's about honoring our whole team here.
Yeah.
the whole community, the residents who support her mom, all the professionals who support her. And that's the reality, that this book is really written from Jill's heart to honor every member of the team that is so important to her mom's care. Yeah.
That's very
At the kind of the very beginning stages, like a lady came up to me and she's like, well, I really hope your book's successful. And I was like, oh, well, it's already been successful. Like, it's not even out or anything, but like I already, people were coming to me, or I was able to lead people to a support group, or, share information. So I feel like if I never sell one more book, I've already, been successful. So, God will, it's his book. Like I just walked the steps. So it'll, whatever he wants to do with it at this point. But that's kind of where how I feel about it. But I think as a final thought, I would just say, that there are no perfect days, but every day is a perfect opportunity to do it better the next time. And I think that's something that I definitely learned, because there's a lot of failure, on our part, because we didn't always know what to do. And in those beginning stages, my mom used to think strings were coming out of her body, and she would just be pulling strings all day long. Okay. Just believe strings were coming out. And you could tell her till you're blue in the face, Mom, there's not strings. Right. And she believed people could talk to her through the air vents, and that there was a new telephone system developed, and that she could hear, my aunt calling her through the air vent. And she'd say, just get down there and listen. You can hear them. Wow. And so you can tell someone, and we would try to argue, which is the very wrong thing to do, but in the beginning, and so just, learning from those mistakes that you will make, because we're human, but like, let's do it better tomorrow. Let's do it differently. Let's have some empathy. Let's listen to a podcast about dementia. Let's, join a support group. Let's reach out to a friend. Let's figure out a way to get, to do it differently. And
right. Wow, that's beautiful. I love there are no perfect days,
no
perfect opportunities, and we learn from our mistakes. We are human. Well said. Thank you both for coming up to Kansas City and being interviewed as a part of the podcast.
Coming home a little bit.
A little bit of a memory moment for you. I'm glad to say that. And thank you all for tuning in and watching. This book will be in our bookstore. I'm even going to reach out to our Silverlink Ministries that works in nursing homes to make them aware of this resource. It might be a great resource for them to share with as well. And if you are don't have a church home, we'd love to be your church home here at resurrection.church. You can worship with us online, TV, or any one of our 6 locations. We also have a care and counseling ministry. So if this is something you're struggling with, if your family is struggling with dementia or any need like that, know that we have resources to support you. We're just so glad you've tuned in today. If you've enjoyed this, share it with a friend and invite them to also grow in our faith together. Thanks again for watching.